G'day guys, Daikaiju Down Under here, and in today's video I'm going to review every single figure you see before you. That's right guys, every single SH MonsterArts Godzilla figure that uses this guy's sculpt here, the 2019 Godzilla sculpt. All 7 of these figures in one video. Let's start. The first figure to use the 2019 sculpt is, of course, the 2019 Godzilla, as you see here. Now, quick disclaimer, this figure here has a custom head sculpt done by Zeto. That's not standard for the figure. I do have the original head, and that's just over here. So we'll take a look at that quickly first before we actually take a look at the figure. So moving him to the side, here you can see the standard head that the figure originally came with. Now, it's not bad, the detail is still very nice. It accurately portrays the 2019 look for the legendary Godzilla. The paint isn't awful, at least on my copy. The teeth fared very, very nicely. So did the eyes and the tongue. However, there just is something slightly off with it, and I couldn't quite figure out what. And I still don't really know what to this day, but for whatever reason, there's something slightly off with this head sculpt, and it made me and a bunch of others really want just a different alternate custom head sculpt. So that's what I got. I got a custom head sculpt for this Godzilla, this one here in particular, to better accurately portray the look of the legendary Godzilla. So now that that's out of the way, let's take a look at the figure itself. And again, because we've got so many figures to cover, guys, this is just going to be a super quick overview, and then we'll move on to the next figure. Alright, so being the first Godzilla to use the 2019 mold, when this figure came out, it was rather exciting. We didn't know what Godzilla would look like in King of the Monsters until we got the promo images from Tamashii Nations showing this figure. And then from that, we sort of realized, oh hey, cool, Godzilla's gonna have some sharper claws on the toes and on the hands. And the biggest change would be the spines, which were updated from the 2014 look to give Godzilla more of an original Toho look. And as some of you may know, these spines here are directly lifted from the 1954 Godzilla. So that was all cool. Looking at the figure itself, we can see that the detail is actually really, really nice. The details are really pronounced. All of the key elements are also highlighted, like you've got those bigger scales up on Godzilla's back here. You've got those defined scales in that sort of triangular, squarish grid pattern look on the thighs there. You can clearly see those more rough scales here on the shins. And you can clearly see the plated look that goes down Godzilla's tail, a look that the legendary Godzilla is known for. So all of the key details and elements are definitely here on the figure, right? The head, again, is a custom head sculpt painted up by me. So that was slightly off, and yet chucking this custom head sculpt on that, it really does help complete the look of the figure. Now let's quickly talk about the paint. Now the paint on this figure is something that a lot of collectors took a little bit of issue with, and I'm sure you can see why. Godzilla here is very, very flat. There's not much paint variation. Godzilla himself is pretty much just a pure flat grey with some very slight, I guess you'd call it olive green highlights, and I don't even think that's paint. I'm pretty sure that's just inconsistencies with the actual mold and the plastic that was used. There's not really any paint on the figure itself, except for a little bit of light tan on the belly there. Again, you can also see that it's pretty inconsistent with the rest of Godzilla, and that's about it. Godzilla is pretty much just a flat color, there's no real paint, and it sort of hinders a lot of those details. I mean, when you take a look at the figure from afar, it all sort of gets lost. It's only under studio lighting, and when you bring it up close to the camera, that you can really, again, see a lot of those details. Now, not that there isn't any paint. There is some paint on the claws, on the hands, and there's a little bit on the toes, but that's about it. outside of the claws and the toes, there's a slight bit of paint on the belly. You can see a little better there. And that was all we really got. So again, the further away the figure is, the harder it is to see because those details just kind of get lost. There's not really much paint there. Articulation on this figure also isn't fantastic, at least not on my copy here. The ab is a tiny bit loose, as you can see, so he can't really hold himself up in certain poses. The way the legs are sculpted, Godzilla can't quite close his legs too far. That's about as close as you can get it, and it sort of looks a little weird despite having the cutout there. I don't know what happened, but it just doesn't quite look right. The tail, despite being well articulated, can only really go so far before it falls apart, which unfortunately seems to be an issue across all of the original base 2019 figures. Another issue that a lot of people have are these shoulders. They're just not great for range. That's as far down as Godzilla can get his arms, and it again doesn't really look great. Now you can move the figure around and get him into some cool dynamic poses, especially because of these ankles. The ankle articulation is actually really nice, but there's only so much that this first Godzilla can do. It looks good from some angles, it doesn't look great from others, it does have issues. As you can see there, it's balancing pretty well now without a tail. But a lot of these things I actually found to be fixed with the next figure that was released. So let's take a quick look at that guy. The major changes between this figure here and the original are clearly the paint and the material that was used in the construction of this figure. This Godzilla is cast in a clear plastic this time around, so when light hits it at just the right angle, it looks absolutely fantastic. I'm not sure how well that's coming up on camera, but every part of this figure is translucent. So under the right lighting conditions, this guy looks phenomenal. But it's not just translucent paint. This figure also has some paint shading and paint variation, something that the original figure was missing. You can see that clearly here on the spines. You've got some nice silver blue at the base of the spines here. It seems like the middle of the spine itself was left completely unpainted, completely translucent, as you can sort of see as I put my hand behind there. And yet on the tips of all of Godzilla's spines, there's a little bit of a dark blue paint job. This is something that makes it look absolutely incredible. On other parts of the figure, there's also more paint variation. There's some slight silver dry brushing on the front here. There's some more of that on the legs here as well, and some on the arms, and even a tiny bit going down the tail. You can really see that nice metallic blue that Tamashii decided to use at the end there. So on top of paint variation being added to this figure, the joint tolerance itself was also improved. Unlike the original, I can actually move the tail around a fair bit without that popping off. And Godzilla doesn't have a loose ab. So no looseness there. You can get a little bit deeper range out of the figure here. Overall, this figure here is just a massive step up, a massive improvement from the first initial release. It looks fantastic up close. It looks fantastic from afar. This here is my favorite 2019 molded figure, if that makes sense. Out of all of the figures that we're going to cover today, this one here is my favorite. So much so that I didn't even feel the need to change the head. So we can actually see what that original head sculpt looked like on this figure here. As you can see, even that tongue is translucent. How awesome is that? And of course, there's no real need to worry about the eyes because the eyes are just solid blue. Very neat, very cool. This figure is awesome. If you can track it down, I do recommend it. Unfortunately, it seems to be very pricey nowadays. However, I think this figure here is the perfect 2019 Godzilla. Now, this is where the head got changed, right? The next release, the next figure, changes the head, and it's probably for the worst. Let's take a look at it. Burning Godzilla here is the third figure to use the 2019 mold and the first to use that really ugly head sculpt. The figure itself doesn't look too bad. I've sort of had a love-hate relationship with the figure. In fact, if you've seen my custom failed Burning Godzilla video, you'll understand that a little better. Now, this figure here is again cast in a translucent plastic, much like the last release. However, This figure is definitely a step down from the last release. As you can see from afar, there's a lot of paint inconsistencies and variation, and annoyingly, the joint tolerance issues are back. This figure likes to also fall apart. Some of the joints are way too tough, some of the joints are way too loose. In fact, if we take a look at that jaw, look at that hinge, that's awful, and it's just overall a mess of a figure, right? The paint looks okay in some areas. It moves relatively the same as the last release, so it has a little bit more joint fluidity, but annoyingly for some reason it falls apart a little bit. At least my copy does at the tail there, and as you can see, some really lazy paint that Tamashii has done here, where they haven't painted underneath the parts that you'll see, just the parts that you see when you assemble the figure. So they've assembled it like that, and they've painted it, and they haven't bothered to move the joints around, and then paint those undersides as well. This figure here, I think, is my least favorite to use this mold. It feels weird, it looks a little off, it still looks good, but it does look just a little off in my opinion, and I don't necessarily like it. Because of the orange glow and the burning effect, the ugly head sculpt isn't that noticeable, right? So from afar, it looks okay, it gets the point across. It's definitely a step down from the last release, but it's not awful overall, right? Anyway, let's move on to the fourth figure to use the 2019 mold. Here we have the fourth Godzilla figure to use this mold. I believe this guy is an event exclusive of some kind, maybe Comic-Con, I'm not too sure. I actually ordered my copy off of a company here in Australia called Pop Culture. Much like the last two, this guy here is cast in a translucent plastic, and it looks really nice. He looks like he's got a cool chill going on. It looks good from afar. I mean, look at that on the camera, that looks really nice. You can sort of take it further back, still looks really nice, got the silhouette of Godzilla. It looks good up close. It kind of looks like a gummy bear, actually. Something about the blue that's been used. It's not quite capturing it here on camera. He looks a little darker than he does in front of me right now. He's a very light blue. He moves very well. The joint tolerances are finally back to how they were before. And overall, this one's just a nice figure. I mean, it's got some white color on the spines there, but that's pretty much all the variation you've got. There's a little bit of solid color on the toenails there, or the toe claws rather. A nice baby blue. Pure black for the eyes. Not too much paint. Detail, again, very nice. Looks very good from afar. I really like this one. I think this one is a cool piece to have in your collection. It sort of looks like a supercharged Godzilla actually, so it probably fits that role very nicely. I don't really have any issues with this one. Even the ugly head's a little bit hidden, just because of the sheer amount of blue plastic and the shine and the glow. I like this one. Let's move on to the next figure, shall we? The fifth figure to use that 2019 sculpt here is this guy, the Godzilla vs Kong Godzilla. Now what makes this one different? The spines. As you can see, Godzilla has some very nice atomic blue radiating throughout the spines. And this was the first figure to give us these clawed alternate hands, which again also look really, really nice. Now, unlike the original 2019 figure, this one here has a lot more obvious paint apps. You've got a lot more of that tan on the underside of the belly. Again, those blues in the spines there are very nice. Godzilla does have some paint on the claws there, same with on the toes. So that's a definite improvement over the 2019 design look. Just a lot more paint application. Now, as you can see, yes, this one here does have a custom head sculpt done by Zeto on Instagram, painted up by me. So we'll ignore that. I think that looks really nice. I think it looks really cool, and it definitely helps to complete the look of Godzilla. But out of the box, this one does unfortunately have that really ugly Godzilla head with some messy paint around the mouth. But ignoring that, it turns out very nice. The articulation stayed relatively the same from the 2019 figure, so I guess the other three that all use that translucent vinyl, a little hit or miss. This one here is basically the same as that 2019 figure because it's using the same plastic. It's even almost the same color. Let's bring it out for a second, shall we? Just to really hammer home that point. Okay, so ignoring the head sculpts here, viewing these two figures side by side, you can see they basically look the same. They've got the same plastic used, not too much color variation, but from a side profile, this one here definitely captures your eye more just because it does have all of that blue in the spines there. You've also got those alternate hands, and when we spin Godzilla around, you can just see just how clearly this one here, a lot more of that tan compared to this one here. It's still present here, but it's a lot more on this one here. The only real improvements that this one has, or rather upside this one has, are maybe those toe claws. They're a little brighter on the 2019 figure, but overall you can see they're pretty similar, so I can see why a lot of people would have skipped this one here if they had this one. However, I actually prefer the Godzilla vs Kong one. Again, it just in my opinion looks a little better on the shelf here, but I also do really like this one here, despite my criticisms at the start of the video, because I do like a vanilla looking Godzilla. Let's move on to the next figure, shall we? The black sheep of the 2019 Godzilla figure mold family. This here is the Night Combat version Godzilla. This figure is controversial, right? Let's just get that out of the way. When this thing was first announced, it was revealed to be an exclusive, but not just an exclusive, a Tamashii Nations store exclusive, which, if you don't know, I believe Tamashii Nations, I hope I'm saying that right, only have 3 storefronts. One in Japan, one in Singapore if I'm not mistaken, and a final location somewhere. Point is, this guy here was very, very hard to get a hold of. It was an exclusive of an exclusive, essentially. It was a very exclusive figure. And yet it doesn't feel like it. This guy here turned out, in my honest opinion, pretty bad. I did still order it, but with hindsight, this is one that I definitely should have skipped. The purple that was used to, I guess, look like night shadows, I don't know. It doesn't look awful. You can see it all on the spines there, down the tail there, and a little line on the front of the legs there, and then another little line on the arms there. It's pretty lazy looking, and it doesn't really have a purpose. This figure also has a horrendous looking head sculpt. I mean, it's the ugly head sculpt that we've been getting for the last couple releases now, but the paint on those teeth are absolutely awful. They're too bright, they're just too ugly looking. I mean, look at that. Looks like it's got pus for teeth. That's just awful. The eyes, not great. And then, for whatever reason, this figure here just is so stiff. The movement on it is absolutely awful. I mean, I can't even move those shoulders. Like this left shoulder is completely locked up. The right elbow here, I mean that, oh, so you got a little stuck there. The wrist, or at least that still moves, and you've got those new sort of claw, battle claw alt hands. That's not awful, but the legs, the thighs, this one over here, for an exclusive of exclusives, I was expecting something way better, and this one just sort of fell flat. Let's move on to the next figure. The final, the latest, probably the last figure a part of the 2019 SH MonsterArts Godzilla family to use the 2019 mold. This figure here is the Godzilla from Godzilla Kong: The New Empire. I really like this one. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I think this figure is actually really, really, really nice. Now again, this one does have a custom head sculpt done by Zeto over on Instagram, but I think this figure turned out really, really well. I mean, look at that pose. That pose is great. This figure here, it gives you Godzilla. It gives you Godzilla with some beautifully gorgeous blue spines. It's a step up from the Godzilla vs Kong release in that way. I mean, look at those spines, guys. Just take a look at those. nice metallic blue. You've got a little bit of frosted silver on the tip there, and you've even got some white highlights just put around just in the middle there. The tail, you've got that nice metallic blue spray again, just like that Blu-ray poster Godzilla. Godzilla's got some nice defined paint on the claws here, on his toes, same with on their hands, and again you've got those really nice battle grappling claw hands. The only downside, the only real step down, there's no shading or anything of any kind on Godzilla's belly. It's just a pure flat black, and yet I still like it. I don't know what it is. I think it has to be those spines, man. Those beautiful blue spines really just complement the design, they complement the figure. The claw paint on the toes is also really nice. I think this one's great. It moves a lot better. The joint tolerance seems to have finally been pretty much perfected on this release. The hands move well, the elbows move well, the shoulders move well. I mean, you can even see some changes have been made here. It looks like the shoulders are sticking out slightly more than before, and I'm sure that's been done to aid in articulation. It does look a little weird, especially on this right side, but I don't know what it is, guys. I really like the look of this figure. There's something about it. It's just got that it factor, you know? I think this one's great. This one here, it does come with the atomic beam. A couple of the others do too, but again, we're not really looking at that. We're just looking at the figures themselves. I really like this one, guys. I think it's great. Now, let's do a final shot with all of the figures present. Alright guys, now that we've taken a look at all 7 figures here, let's talk about which ones I think are my favorite. Let's go in order from least favorite to favorite. So, coming in last, the least favorite figure here has to be this guy. It's the Godzilla Night Combat version. It just misses all of the marks. Following that up, we have the Burning Godzilla here. After him, we've got the base MonsterArts 2019 Godzilla, the one that started it all. Now, top 3 was very hard to decide. Between these two here, this could go either way. I actually think this Godzilla here, the Godzilla Kong, the new Empire Godzilla, just barely beats out the Godzilla vs Kong figure here. So it's for that reason that this figure is 4th, whereas this figure here comes in 3rd. Now, between these two, you might have already been able to tell from the video, I think the MonsterArts Godzilla Blu-ray exclusive version, poster version, whatever have you, is the definitive. It's the best. It looks the best. I love this one. This one's my favorite here, with the event exclusive Blue Godzilla here coming in a close second. But that's it, guys. That's all I've got for you in today's video. We took a look at all 7 figures here. That's my ranking. And we sort of go from left, snaking up here to these two, with the Crown King being this guy in the center here. Let me know what you think. Which figure here is your favorite? Which one do you have? Which one do you skip? Which one do you think is just awful? Let me know down in the comment section below. I've been Dakaiju Down Under, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.